We're live.
And we're live. Okay. This is gonna be the one. So let's start from the tippy top. For those of you who are just turning in for the 8th or ninth time, um, it has been about a week. It's been about a week and a half since we've done one of these. So it's nice to be back. We would like to thank all of you for your support, your weekly support, those who tune in live, as well as those who tune in later on YouTube. If you're tuning in later on YouTube, please hit like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's perfect for us. We need you to hit like and subscribe. Okay, please do that. So, without further ado, I am just one of your hosts. My name is Peter Mack. For those of you who don't know me, and there's absolutely no reason in the world why you should, I work in the musical theater, a cabaret artist. I've done several off-Broadway shows, written for the Huffington Post, penned a book called Cinema Salem with a foreword by the great Laura Parker. Actually wrote a Laura Parker's last off-Broadway play for her, Mrs. Scrooge. And I work primarily as a Judy Garland tribute artist, as well as several Golden Age ladies of Hollywood and Broadway. So that is my spiel. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Panzerato, and hopefully I will go out of slow motion in that time.
Good evening, everybody. I am Michael Panzerato. I am an actor as well. You can see of late some of my work in Get Lost in Space, Escape from Earth, voicing Dr. Zachary Smith, who is my guy of them all. Shadows fan the whole way. So thanks for joining us. Please hit like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you a penny and takes 2 seconds. Thank you. Oh no, to the brains in the outfit.
I almost don't want to take credit for this one because I'm not sure what gremlins are on the internet today that are out to get our show. I'm Dr. John Mack. I'm Peter's husband. I have shared a dressing room with Nancy Beck. Boy, do I have stories. I have spent a great deal of time with Marie Wallace. She lived on the same block as us in New York City. And one of our favorite people who's no longer with us, Laura Parker. And I've been a Dark Shadows fan since Peter and I have been together, so about 22 years. Okay, that's it.
Very good, very good. So it's nice to be back because we did have, what, about a week and a half hiatus?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, it's just been about a week and a half, I think, since we did House of Dark Shadows Redux.
I don't remember.
First of all, I want to give a shout out to all of the other Dark Shadows podcasts, virtual chat shows that are out there, including Miss Penny Dreadful. Penny is probably one of the most giving of everybody that's involved in this particular circle. She is very quick to promote, to encourage, and to endorse. So we love you, Penny. Penny is going to be appearing. Let me bring this up. She's making an appearance. I want to make sure I get this right. Where are my photos? There we go. She will be appearing at the Dark Arts Festival presented by Horror Depot this coming Sunday, August 11th at Battlegrounds in Rhode Island. And from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., she will be there with her Shilling Shockers items. Terror at Collinwood, which is the name of her podcast, stickers and postcards. And she's going to be introducing a lecture by paranormal investigators and judging a cosplay costume contest.
Oh.
So go and check that out if you're in Rhode Island, and check out Terror at Collinwood, as well as Resident of Collinwood, Between the Shadows, Collinsport After Dark, the Dark Shadows Daybook, on and on and on. There's a lot of great other great podcasts and virtual chat shows out there.
And to those chat shows out there who promote our show, we are so unbelievably grateful. Penny Dreadful being the one who talks about us all the time. So we love you, Penny.
Yeah, Penny is good people.
Carrie Perwicka is so excited that we're live. She wants to send her love.
Hey, Carrie, thanks for tuning in. So, since we're talking about Dark Shadows, I would be remiss if I did not mention it is a particular witch's 140th birthday today. Miss Billy Burke, famous for playing Glinda, the Good Witch of the North in The Wizard of Oz. And it is, if you've ever watched Dark Shadows all the way through and you get to the 1840 storyline, Joan Bennett is clearly doing an homage to Billy Burke as Flora Collins. So that's why I had to bring that up. We've talked about that, Michael.
And
I
she
love
was,
that too. I didn't notice it until you said it. I love it, but it's so true.
and for those movie buffs slash theater buffs out there, because you always comment that we always bring up tangential items, Billy Burke was Mrs. Florence Ziegfeld,
That is correct. She was the wife of the late great Florence Ziegfeld.
as in Ziegfeld Follies.
That is correct. Also, today marks the anniversary of the 39th anniversary of the passing of Grayson Hall.
Oh.
She died
Oh,
39 years ago today. So that was a sad passing. I believe she was only 62 or 66.
I read that in Shadowground.
Yeah, yes. And we're going to leave that there, John. But obviously, Grayson is one of the most beloved stars on Dark Shadows, so I did want to bring up that today is her Angelversary. So go online, go on to YouTube, go on to Dark Shadows Fans Unite, which is kind of like a Cliff Notes version of the series, and you can watch all these great compilations of the best of Grayson Hall, some of her best moments from her introduction all the way through to the end of the series. I think one of my favorite moments is in the final storyline. It's between her and Keith Prentice. they're trapped in the lottery room, and she starts off all contained, and she goes, "No, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Just say no, die, we're going to." And he just whacks us. And I just wondered how Keith Prentice could keep a straight face, because she's obviously playing it straight, but the way it's reading, it always gives me the giggles, because she starts off so contained, and in milliseconds, she's having a full-on panic attack. She needs a Xanax.
Grayson Hall.
Francois the hysterical.
I know we're going to do a whole Grayson Hall episode.
Yes.
But tell the story real quickly, since it's the anniversary of her passing.
Yes.
About what Matthew, her son, used to do. Kids at school would ask for autographs.
Oh, well, no, this was one particular time, and for those of you who are in the know, you probably know this, because Matt tells the story in a video interview, but he got in trouble. He got in trouble for something at school, and he had to sign. They were like, you take this home to your mother and have her sign it. And he didn't want Grayson to know he had gotten in trouble. So he's like, what am I going to do? Well, kids were always asking for her autograph. So he waited till the morning, because she was usually asleep. So he waited. Oh, here's my little girl coming into the picture here. Wheezy Boo. And she was in bed, and he's like, Mom, one of the kids at school asked for your autograph. Would it be all right? Could you sign this? And she's like, yeah, sure, Matt, give me a pen. And she goes... That's just the way he did it, by the way. That's just the way he did it. And she goes to sign the top, and he goes, no, lower. So she's like... And she signs the bottom, and he takes in the piece of paper saying, I was a bad boy or whatever. And he's like, but you can only do that if your mother's on a famous soap opera.
So funny.
The voice. I love the voice.
Right. Sure, Matt, give me a pen.
We want to say hello to Carmen and Angelica, Brian, and Connie. Hello. They just joined us.
Thanks for joining us, guys. So, every week we try to pick something new and innovative to talk about, whether it's a storyline or a character, and I thought it would be fun for us to focus on young David Collins, And we're going to pose the question, is he really a demon child or is he just misunderstood?
Are we allowed to vote?
And please chime in with your questions and comments about this. I'm going to start off with Michael. I'm going to keep my trap shut and start off with Michael. I want your initial thoughts about David.
Well, I think that first of all, I think he was. I mean, I think he had to have had something transferred to him, mommy being a phoenix and all. Um, I find David as troublesome as Barnabas found him, and as Roger found him at times, and other people. I found David to be a normal kid, uh, dealing with what a kid in his situation would have dealt with. I mean, he had no one to play with until until Sarah showed up, and that wasn't on David. That was whoever's deal that was, and then Amy. So I know everybody in my family explored places we weren't supposed to explore, and I know that we were constantly going places we weren't supposed to go. And the more I watched, I went back and revisited quite a few of the initial Barnabas is pissed off at everybody early episodes, and then I moved forward to the period when Quentin started to take over. It was really cool to see the affection grow between the two of them, but particularly with Barnabas toward the boy. And I think Barnabas starts to realize that it's just a kid more and more as it goes. Of course, his life was a little bit threatened with David poking around the coffin and everything. But I think he was. I'm sure he had some kind of supernatural ability. I mean, if this were a supernatural conversation as though they were real people, I would say, well, it's probably what attracted Sarah, or what made him so sort of clairvoyant, or Quentin, or all of that, that he had something else other than to do with him. But I think he was. I think the behavior was the negligent father, and just being a normal kid growing up in what looked like a palace with an adjacent old palace for a clubhouse, and the disappointment that a 9-year-old would have gone through if somebody suddenly moved in and kicked your ghosts out. So I find David's behavior uh, very freaking normal, and a lot more stable than it could have been, knowing, as he grew older, the things that were going on around him. He could have been way, way worse. So, good on you, Davey. You half Phoenix bastard, you.
Yay! Oh, yay! I love it.
Yes, sir.
I love it. Well, I mean, here's my take on it, is that, one, I don't know how he could have been totally normal given his parents, because Roger was totally self-absorbed. Clearly not all there himself. Should probably never have been a father. And then there's also a question as to whether he really is David's father. So we got that going on. Then you've got Laura for a mother. And what I want to bring up here is, for those of you who don't have this, and it's hard to get, and I'm in slow motion, so I apologize. Shadows on the Wall. It was the original title of the show. And this is Art Wallace's Bible, which was, I think, supposed to be the story trajectory for about the first 6 months or so of the show. Probably about 60 pages, we've got 91 pages here. Background about Collinsport.
You said something earlier off camera. You said that Roger and Elizabeth's father was Joseph.
Yes. So when I'm going through here, and I wanted to bring that up.
It said that it's another person.
Right. Well, Art Wallace had clearly envisioned a gentleman by the name of Joseph Collins. I think I'm going to bring that up in here, but just a little bit about David, because I think it's important, since Art Wallace created the character, and I think it gives the middle of the road fan a better idea of what's going on in David's head. David grew up in an angry, bitter, divided household. Roger hated him, seeing nothing but a living reminder of the man he'd sent to prison. Laura alternately smothered him with affection and shattered him with recrimination. By the time he was 5, David had learned the best protection was silence. He was a quiet, uncommunicative, unhappy boy. When he was 6, his father received a phone call that seemed shattering. A call that was followed almost immediately afterwards by the most violent battle Roger and Laura ever had. Furniture was tossed, blows were struck.
She,
Hang on, I was
it was your
knocked
baby.
off by my baby girl. That's not an Art's Bible here. I'm back, right? No? Yes?
She did something. You're back.
And what's that you said? Blows were what?
Blows were struck. Furniture was tossed, blows were struck.
That's exciting.
And to the little boy cowering behind a closed door, the shrieks of anger, punctuated by the shouting of the name Burke Devlin, were food for nightmares that still persist. And then it says, he mentions the father of Elizabeth and Roger being Joseph Collins. So there's some really interesting. Laura becomes a raging alcoholic. She's addicted to 180 proof scotch.
Girl.
But still maternal to David in that she always hugs him and keeps him close to her. The 9-year-old boy is a strange companion to Elizabeth and Carolyn, unpredictable in attitude and behavior, devious and sly, hostile and untrusting, but with a young boy's curiosity and need for approval. His moods change with lightning-like speed. He is a frightened and often frightening child. So that was just a little bit of Art Wallace's character breakdown of David. I think it gives a great insight as to his mind. What do you think?
Well, interesting about Burke Devlin. I didn't know that Burke was suspected of being. And I'm listening to you say this. I'm thinking to myself, my God, what a contemporary series this would be if they did it now and they could go a little deeper into all of that. How beautiful, so much that goes on today, but also that what an oddly entrenched. So Burke had it all possibly with Laura. He is possibly David's father, and after Victoria, who is possibly Elizabeth's daughter. So that's very interesting to me. But dear David, I don't know. Like, I think that contributes to what I was saying. Everything he does is absolutely at par with what his experiences taught him.
Exactly.
So, for the record, everybody and their mother has weighed in. Jameson Collins was Elizabeth and Roger's father.
Right. By the time the story progressed, Jameson would have been
Yeah.
Elizabeth. Yes. So Joseph was obvious. And remember, I think Art and Dan had parted ways by the time we get to 1897. I don't think Art, even though he got credit, he was no longer affiliated with Dan Curtis at that point, if I'm not mistaken.
Wasn't that a story by and some characters? How did they credit him?
Yeah, he was credited with story developed by. And then for the new Dark Shadows, he had to get a credit, but it was certain story elements and characters developed by Art Wallace. There was some kind of litigious thing there. But by 1897, they had parted ways.
1897 storyline, probably 1967.
Probably 67. I'm sure I think Art was out of the picture by then. I think. I'd have to look that up. But yeah, I mean, growing up in a broken home as I did, my father was very abusive. Tore the phone out of the wall, would tear up the house, beat the crap out of my mom. And you had two frightened little boys. That's something that Joseph and I carry within ourselves to this day. You don't forget that stuff. So I think people are a little too hard on David, considering everything that he witnessed at home. I mean, he loves Aunt Elizabeth, but still, I think he's got his guard up saying, can I really trust her? She says she loves me, and she's always hiding David behind her skirt every time Roger threatens to hit him. So,
Well, and then there's the like, and this may be prying a little too deep, but the whole trust issue. Also, a kid like that, uh, seeing what Elizabeth had gone through, moments of deep depression, the fact that she wanted to throw herself off of Widow's Hill, the
Yeah.
fact that she predicted the whole situation with Cassandra and her morbid obsession with death, which ended up being true. The fact that when you're that kid that grows up in a house like that with no siblings, and you rely on a cousin as your closest thing to a sibling, and then that cousin goes off and threatens marriage to some hippie or beatnik. And now Carolyn's out of the picture, in the picture, out of the picture, in the picture. He's kind of forced into a situation where you have to be untrusting or your feelings are constantly hurt. You're constantly in a state of pain. So you have to keep people at arm's length. And I think that also adds more to the whole thing about him drawing in all these spirits. Sarah, who is also a lost child, who can't find family and is looking for some kind of connection. Quentin, who, as much of a toolbox as he was, really got obsessed with David because David looked like the only person that Quentin ever loved, Jameson,
right.
who happens to be David's grandfather. You know, so there's so much about David that's almost more explainable than the rest of the Collins family.
Right.
Roger, like, what's your problem? you know, other than the fact that you're a spoiled child. What is Roger's beef with life? He had everything, except the trophy, the extraordinary wife, which she was a beautiful woman. So, I just think David's he's what most of us would be in that situation.
Well, it's interesting that you say this because I'm on the same page as you. And Peter just relayed his personal story and how much it resonated. But until you just said this, Michael, I hadn't thought about how it relates to me. Peter knows this. So I apologize if I'm slurring a little bit. I have a very bad toothache, so I apologize in advance. I'm seeing the dentist tomorrow. But nonetheless,
And Julia's not here to give him a shot.
exactly. Um, but I grew up in a house where my maternal figure, my mother was out of the picture. I was raised by my grandmother, but my grandmother never left the house. From 1976 until she died in 1986, she never left the house. And so I had that influence of my life. So I can imagine David, who the only female figure other than Carolyn in the house, rocking him, walking the floors at night was Elizabeth. There's no other talk of another governess. So, I mean, the real maternal bond there. What was it like to see your maternal figure not be able to go to a school play, not see your kindergarten graduation? I mean, all of those kinds of things. So sorry, I didn't mean to throw in.
That's what we're here. We're here to discuss and
No,
debate,
no,
and yeah.
that's, that's absolutely on par.
And we've gone very far into this episode without mentioning
I think we're
how
agreed that people are rough with David.
Yes.
and how brilliant is David Hennessy. He's just so
Natural.
good. That's it, natural.
Mitch Ryan said that. He said, when you played a scene with him, he really
Very
looked you in
much
the
so.
eye. He really looked you in the eye and he talked to you and you were really connecting. Um, and of course, Robert Costello, one of the executive producers, relayed that, not only did he know all his lines, but he knew everybody else's lines. So when they would go up, he would correct them. And then every once in a while, there would be a kind of a pause, and he would jump in, and whoever would be, like, I'm just taking a pause. I'm acting. I'm acting, David. I'm just taking a pause. I know my line.
And what did we learn
Oh,
recently?
well, that's funny about Burke, um, because he does attach himself. I mean, Burke is almost more of a father figure to him than Roger in many. I mean, the whole Burke and Dr. Woodard thing. Now I sound like Ben Cross. Woodard, Stoddard. Um, when they're buying it with Barnabas, they go to the mausoleum and the old house, and when he in one of my favorite scenes when Barnabas catches David, which is the line that's been in my head all the way, "Hello, David, I've been looking everywhere for you." The way that David grabs a hold of Burke, and that's Burke that's there is kind of telling too. It's interesting.
Yeah, and it's especially with Mitch Ryan. I really feel there's a resemblance there, and I think that's what they were going for. There's something about the eyes. And I know Penny doesn't like this and the reason she doesn't like it is because if Burke is his father, then David isn't really a Collins, and then that's the end of the Collins family.
Oh, got it.
So, but I'm like, well, maybe there could be a loophole in there somehow
Oh,
because I believe that Burke is his father. And go back and watch some of those scenes between Laura and, in fact, I think Burke flat out says it to, it might be to Vicky. It may very well be to Vicky that he says, I've often wondered if I'm really David's father. I mean, it's something to that effect. It is so broadly hinted at that he might have gotten Laura pregnant.
Now, in the I don't remember that where so he actually says it that I think I'm his father or I could be his father.
It's if he doesn't use those exact words. I wish I could have had a chance to go back and bring that up. I'm pretty sure Burke strongly alludes to it.
Interesting. Okay.
It's I can't remember now if he comes flat out and says it.
Because they dated before she married Roger.
She was dating Burke, I believe.
Got it.
Laura was a party girl. Apparently, that's the impression we get was that Laura was a party girl. I also want to throw in here about Laura is that and we'll have to get into this into another panel, but the Laura Collins that comes back in 1967, and David says this when he first meets her and runs up to back to he gets terrified. He runs from the drawing room up to his bedroom, and Vicky says, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And he goes, "That woman isn't my mother." And my belief is that his real mother is the woman who died in Phoenix because she was possessed by the spirit of Laura Collins. So it's that centuries old Laura Collins that takes on the guise of his mother and shows up. So it looks like her, but it's not really. It's not really his mother. His mother did die.
oh
This is
my
now,
God.
that's my belief. And he alludes to that. He's like, she's not my mother. The first
Do you,
few episodes, he's like, that's not my mom.
Interesting.
I hope that they utilize this if they do a reboot because the idea of a mimic, a dark being that seems so much like but isn't, is so popular now on YouTube storytelling and all. It's such a popular thing, and it's so the changeling. It's so freaking eerie. My thing about Burke shining to David, I don't know if this means he's father or not. I think though Burke is just a good person. I mean, I think he has his share of mistakes behind him, but I think
Sure.
Burke is a human being. And I think his stance a lot of the times is sort of, what the hell's the matter with these people? And I think he wants to be somebody there for David because they're simply, other than Vicky, and I mean, I do think Elizabeth loves him, and I do think Carolyn do, but
Yes.
they're flawed. I think he tries to be that normal father figure to David. I think whether that means it's his dad or I've had it off with his mother a few times. I might feel a little bit more attached, even if he weren't, or sorry for him. We've had this discussion before. I think sometimes Roger is underwritten. I think Louis Edmonds is such a good actor, and his principal character was so underwritten. when he started to get involved with the Leviathan thing, I thought that was so great. I would have loved to have seen him. And when he tried to stand up to Quentin, when he started to show some paternal care for David, when Quentin ran them out of the great house.
Yes.
You enjoy that. You as the viewer, you want him to get off and be the father that, and to Burton's credit, the scene that was written into the Dark Shadows movie where Barnabas takes him by the throat and says, you have a choice. Either you take this money and go away, or you be the father that boy so desperately desires. I mean, and so Barnabas, I think, took that role over in the movie. And then maybe later on in the series, he tried to be a father to David, or at least a dark hero to David.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, I don't know how many people watching have seen the different variations. So, of course, we have the original series. Then you have the 1991 series, the 2004 pilot that was not finished. And then we have the Johnny Depp movie, which, talk about a whole show we're going to have there. That's going to be interesting. But from a two-episoder, we're going to get a lot of letters for that one. But I think that in the reboot, in the 91 reboot, first of all, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was wonderful. Someone asked the question, and I'm going to answer it on here, that apparently he will not talk about Dark Shadows. He refuses to talk about it. He will not sign anything Dark Shadows related. Maybe he's changed, but for a period of time, I knew fans that would go to see him in shows, and if you put something to, he would just push it away. He would not acknowledge Dark Shadows. I don't know why. It's part of his past. So, but he was wonderful.
wow.
And they really, I mean,
show.
Yeah, yes. And like David Hennessy, he was a natural. He's a little reminiscent of David Hennessy. There's something about him. He was a little fuller faced than David Hennessy. And
Same
you've got
coloring.
same coloring, and you've got Laura, who's supposed to be in a sanitarium somewhere, who is possessing him. I mean, he sets the doll on fire, the voodoo doll of Roger, and Maggie, has to telepathically zone in, and Vicky comes into the room and brings it all to an end, and we find out that the reason that he's not in regular school is because he set the school on fire.
Right.
So
I tell you, I found in the series that David very likable as well. It was the same. However, I found Roger so much more. I disliked Roy Fiennes, as an actor. The character was perfect. I'm not commenting on the actor. The character of Roger in the '91 revival. It was like they built up to the worst. So the Roger on the TV series is my favorite Roger. Then the revival, and then the absolute horrible guy in the
Johnny,
How do you pronounce Roy?
Roy Finnis?
Roy Finnis is in the
one. But he was not a good. Yeah, his Roger seemed even less interested in the kid than our Roger, than Louis Edmonds. So yeah, it's crazy.
What you're saying about the Leviathan storyline is what happens in the Laura storyline is once he realizes that something truly bizarre is going on, and that maybe Dr. Guthrie is right, that this is not the real Laura, that there's something funny is going on here, his attitude towards David changes. And they do give him this kind of turnaround, where he's saying, I don't know that I want you to go away with your mother. I thought we were just getting to know each other better. And, I think I kind of like you to stay here at Collinwood with me. And he's truly trying to protect him. So he does, they give him, they didn't do it quite a lot. Because even when Barnabas is menacing David, which is, I think, one of the worst things. I was watching those scenes the other night. The kinescope where there's David in his room, and then all of a sudden he's on the steps of the mausoleum, and there's Barnabas, and the mouth going, larger and larger and larger, and he's screaming his head off. Um, you know, Barnabas really did a number on David.
He did, and I think what is cool is that Roger and Joshua. I was thinking about this just last night too. We've discussed this Collins family. The writers were brilliant at writing in certain traits to the family. They were all strong-willed in their own way. So like Sarah Barnabas was obviously very strong-willed. Sarah was very strong-willed. Quentin was extremely strong-willed. David was strong-willed. They all have this like strong-will thing, and Louis Edmonds has this brilliant way of playing. You think of the expression fathers and sons because he is Joshua. He's this patriarch who you're going to absolutely do what I say. There's no other way around this. And then one by one, he starts losing out, and he realizes that starts to crack, and he starts to warm up a little bit. And he gives Ben his freedom, and he warms up. And the same is true with Louis Evans, with what you're saying. Louis Evans, with Roger, with what you're saying is when he gets the inkling that something is true and something is threatening his son or something is threatening, he does start to warm up a little and he does start to get a little bit more paternal and that kind of thing. So and those two had some pretty good scenes together, Louis Edmonds and David Hennessy. I thought they had some pretty nice.
Yeah, that especially that scene when he's coming to blows with Laura and realizing something is strange here. He sits him down in front of the fireplace and they have a man-to-man talk and you genuinely like he's kind of realizing I've been taking all my anger at Burke and wrongfully putting it on this child. It's like it kind of clicks.
Yeah. Right.
We actually have a question / comment from Connie.
Hey, Connie.
So this is really about the fact that David, as a child, he almost is the conduit to a lot of the supernatural things that happen in the house. Maybe because he's so innocent and young, that he's able to see Sarah Collins, that he's the first one to see Quentin's ghost. So she's like, she wants to know what we think about that.
Agreed. I could totally see why.
Yeah, hella conduit.
Yeah,
Yeah, hella conduit.
Why Josette would have been drawn to him, because certainly the Josette that they had put out there was this symbol of purity and love and innocence. So she would have wanted to protect him. And then Barnabas. Well, I mean, with Sarah, I was watching that the other night. Where he's so. Why has she come back? And Julia says, don't you think maybe you might have willed your sister to come back? And that's why she's here? And in doing so, David is the only little boy around, so that's who she befriends.
Yeah.
Carrie just wants to mention that she loves, when we said how good an actor that David Hennessy is, that you really get to see it in the parallel time storylines. Is the different versions of David. You actually can tell the different versions of David. And for a young actor, how amazing that is.
Oh, well, then he got to be Count Petoffy, in 1897. Talk about a real...
I was just going to say, what about Count Petoffy? I mean, that was wild. He was a sinister little man, in the glove, it was beautifully played.
That demonic laugh and calling the shots. Yeah, he played it to the hilt. He totally played it to the hilt. Went on a little too long, but he was great.
Is it Barnabas? Is that when Barnabas took him through the side path? He was always being jerked into that side room. In the great house, that secret panel in the main room.
In the drawing room.
Is that where Barnabas grabs him and kidnaps him, and then Stokes grabs him and does the same other timeline? He's always being yanked into that little panel.
I love that scene, and unfortunately, guys, usually we have clips. My computer was not cooperating tonight, but when Stokes is brought in...
Mercury retrograde.
When Stokes is brought in to to see what's going on. Are they really possessed? And they're in the drawing room, and he's talking to, is it Julia? I think he's talking to Julia. And all of a sudden, he shushes her, and he slides open, and David's been listening the whole time. And he gets David to admit that Quentin is in the room with them. He finally gets David to admit that he's under possession. It's a really great scene between Thayer and David Hennessy. Did we lose Michael?
Oh, yeah.
We lost Michael. All right, I will try to keep the conversation going. We back? We got him back.
Michael's back.
Hello.
Hello.
We're talking about the scene
Laura pulled me into the portal.
Into paradise. Into paradise. When Thayer finally gets David to admit that Quentin is in the room.
Right.
It's a really good scene.
Oh yeah. I love that, and it's a very eerie scene of David's is the birthday party with the puppets, and that is very unsettling. And I don't like to watch that scene. I'll forward through that because I find it very creepy.
It's
and imagine a child going through that.
Right.
Totally.
So
there was another interesting. David apparently had a stage mother. I think they had a good relationship. But I get the impression that she treated David more like an adult. So when they first started, she was an astrologer. I believe she wrote several books about astrology.
Oh, wow.
You can buy them. I think you can buy them used on Amazon. But when they were starting the series to do the location shoots up at Seaview Terrace in Connecticut, she dropped him off and walked away. And they're all looking at each other and they're like, I guess we're in charge of the kid. So Robert Costello said we became roommates for the entire time that we were there. And they filmed at the Griswold Inn, which was the Collinsport Inn in Essex, Connecticut. So he said, I got him tucked in, I put him into bed, and we went into the restaurant, and it's just us, it's Dan Curtis and me and whoever, and we're playing poker and smoking cigars, and all of a sudden the room gets totally silent. They look up, and there's this little 9-year-old in his pajamas. So Uncle Robert scooped him up. He's like, I took him back there. Oh my God, this is going to go on all night. I'm going to be taking this kid back and forth to bed. But he had an affinity for him. He just said everybody loved David Hennessy. And the infamous story about he had the hot plate. He brought a hot plate into work in his dressing room and he started making lunch and charging for it.
He was born to be a restaurateur.
That's it. Exactly.
Nuggie
says hello.
Hey, Nuggie. There's my boy.
I also love the scenes with him and Nancy Barrett.
Oh, yes.
Hello, love.
Yeah.
They were great.
Yeah.
I love the scenes between him and Lamar when she's Cassandra. And the things that she makes him do, and then everyone starts to think, is he regressed? Is he really an evil child? I just love those interactions.
She makes him mute. It's like, oh my God, not only did I have a whacked out mother, now I've got an even more whacked out stepmother.
Right, well, exactly. This poor kid.
I like when she says, please, David, not now, I have a headache. When he was with the recorder with Dr. Lang. Please, David, not now. I have a headache. He needed help fixing it or something. He couldn't get it to play or something like that.
That's right.
I love that scene.
Yeah.
Well, she's really interesting. Now, what you're saying about when she was his stepmother, In the 1897, oh God, am I phrasing? Oh, when she's talking to Barnabas and she says, "Don't you think I care for David too?" And I thought that was pretty telling. I thought that was pretty interesting. You
Yeah,
know, he's telling her why he's there, and she says to him, "I know," like kind of reminding him, "I know who David is, and I do have." That fascinates me for some. I think because she was so kind of distant with him as Cassandra, there must have been something there, you know, because she could have wiped him out if she wanted to, but she
it's
didn't. She
true.
certainly didn't mind wiping Sarah out,
It's
you
true.
know. So it must be something.
Carmen Cruz wants to let us know
So
that it's episode 132 where Burke mentions to Laura uh, David is the son they may have had together.
That's it. That's it. Okay, so I was not totally off. Yeah.
We're getting a lot of people who are
interesting.
commenting. So this is from Jerry. Jerry says he loves when David has. Oh, this is sweet. When David has a friend like Sarah, like Amy Jennings, you know. So that yes, when he has somebody more around his age.
Yeah, and he was so sweet with Sharon Lentz. Just to digress from the storyline, but they both talked about this, they the set was their playground. And the cobwebs were spun rubber, so what you did was you would take them down, roll them up, and you could make super balls out of them and play with. They would bounce. So they would drive the prop guy crazy. They'd pull down the spider webs in the old house, and then they would turn them into balls that they could play with.
Do you know how they make those spider webs?
I don't.
Nonsensical trivia from me. They take a traditional uh, drill that you would get at any hardware store. They put a round sander disc on it, and they actually. You remember in school we used to have the Elmers, the one that would actually open and it had the little wand in it.
Yeah.
They attach it and they
Oh
spray
yes.
it. It's the spray of that cement, that rubber cement. So nonsensical trivia.
No, no, not at all. And
And the kinkiest thing I've ever heard.
Can we talk about the blue candles and the hot wax? Never mind.
but they would
Right.
play, and they would play in they would play in the coffins. They would play in the coffins. She said
Oh.
it was a great hide and seek place, except it got boring after a while. And one day she got in trouble because she went in Barnabas's coffin, and David sat on the top
Oh
and made
no.
her late for an entrance.
Oh no.
Yeah, he sat on top of the coffin and wouldn't let her out.
Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah, but
I like the Amy and David storyline, and the what is it, Jameson and Nora? Is it Nora? She's
Nora.
Nora. Yeah, I like those much better. I find the Sarah and David. There's something very, very sad to me about Sarah, and so Sarah, and in those earlier episodes with Maggie and all, Sarah always brings a twinge of sadness when she comes on to me. And then so it's like a lighthearted, although it's not lighthearted. It's more lighthearted to me when he's playing with Amy and all of that than it is when he's with Sarah. The flute going in the background, London Bridges all the time, and she says she doesn't know where anybody is. She's just looking for them all over the place and all of that. I just a little sad to me. But I mean, I love it. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy it. But
it's
as far as
bittersweet.
relationships go,
It's bittersweet. And also
right?
in the 91 series, she's already his friend. We have to assume that she's been his friend for about a good year before Barnabas has
Oh
even
yeah,
come on the scene. They tell Vicky, he claims to have a little friend Sarah, who and he even shows Barnabas the photo.
right. That's true.
He's who is this Sarah? And he pulls up the little
Yeah,
painting of her. So she's already been on the scene. They're already very good friends when Barnabas is unchained from his coffin.
that's true.
I liked David in
And
the
yet he's less nervous about her than our Barnabas.
yes, yes, much less nervous. I liked I really liked David in the Johnny Depp movie. I liked that, and there were so many cut scenes where they're like playing dinosaurs together, he's truly, in the Johnny Depp movie, he wants to be the father that David deserves.
Mm-hmm.
There's a cut scene with Vicky where they're walking on the beach. Barnabas has his sunglasses on, looking very Michael Jackson. And she says, you know, all he ever talks about are you and his mother. Those are the only two subjects David ever wants to talk about, is Laura and you. And these were all cut scenes from the movie, but I mean, you even in the film itself, you get the idea that he's being very protective of David because he kicks Roger out.
Yep. And I love that. I love that aspect of like I said, when I get in a bad mood, I want to watch Barnabas kick everybody's ass. That's my therapy
Yeah.
for a week. I'll watch episodes where this one has to be dealt with, and that one will have to be dealt with, and all that when I'm in a mood. But I love, and in Night Whispers, there's a scene, which is the audio of the last thing that Jonathan Fritt did as Barnabas, and he says, the line is something like, I may be, if there's one thing I learned from my curse, is that it was all worth it if it's helped me to protect those people that live in Collinwood. And then another one was, he says, I may be a protector, I may be a gentleman, I may even be a protector, but I can be cruel and I can be ruthless. Well, Jonathan Fritt, ruthless. But I love that side of Barnabas, and I think that that's what people love, is that Barnabas is going to go to bat for the family, and he is the sort of dark angel in the background who is keeping an eye on things, and you want to believe that he cares for David when they finally stops tormenting him psychically. You want to think that he really does love them and all that kind of stuff. So I wish they'd kept those damn scenes in. That would have might have done some more for the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great scenes. I mean, again, you bring it back to when he's menacing him in the original show. And I love that dream sequence. I wish they could find the first part of the episode where you've got Julia, which is Grayson Hall's stand-in. She's got her face covered with the football helmet wig on, and she's dangling the medallion.
Right.
And then he goes into that room with those red abstract, like something out of a haunted house attraction. I love what Cy Thomasoff did with that, and there's the coffin. Um, and it's, Sarah, my little Sarah, you've come back
Those
at
early nightmares were
last.
phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah.
He's
But
in his cape with the cane. Like he went to bed with his coat on and his cane in his hand. I love that.
and then when
Yep. And you know
he
what I like too? What you mentioned, those early nightmares were tremendous. They were beautifully done.
they really were. They were totally dead. I apologize, guys, because I keep freezing over here, so I'm sorry I'm a step behind everybody. But when he finally was it David
Me
says,
too.
look, he'll get you, Sarah, look out. When he gets him up against the wall, and all you see is the cane slowly going up and coming down, in that great Robert Cobert stinger, and it's scary. I mean, it's like, oh wow, he just did the kid in.
We do
Yeah.
apologize.
Those
The video is freezing, but they can hear us perfect without any interruptions. So we apologize for the video.
Oh,
Apparently, it's a gremlin in the system.
Don't forget, folks, John and I live in Salem, so who knows who lived in.
Now that we've disclosed the undisclosed location, Salem, Massachusetts, what do we always say about this house? You
the
feel
real
it sometimes.
Collinwood.
The real Collinwood. Um,
Our house, even when it's um, the thermostat says it's room temperature, there are pockets in this house that are freezing. So take that for what it's worth. A lot of people are asking, Is there any reason why David was written out of the show after the film?
I believe he wanted out.
Is that right?
I believe he wanted out. I think he wanted to. I mean, there's a funny story that Michael Stroka tells when they were filming House of Dark Shadows, and somehow David Hennessy got the impression that someone was getting paid more than he was. So he gets Curtis on the phone, and Stroka's just watching. And Dan, I understand so and so is getting more money than I am.
Who's saying this now?
David Hennessy to Dan Curtis.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I dropped my cane. So it hit a pillow, luckily, on the floor. I thought ahead.
Oh.
But he's like, Dan, I understand so and so is getting more money than me. Dan, man, I don't need this. I can always go back to high school. And I think essentially, once we get into 1840, which like the tee up to 1840 with David and Hallie, they were way too old to be doing that. What worked with him and Amy, it made no sense to have them in the playroom. It just meanders. And you're like, for Christ's sake, just let Barnabas and Julia go back to 1840 already. Because it looked ridiculous. It's one of my least favorite tee-ups. They're just rehashing the Quentin storyline, and it doesn't work.
I thought the same thing I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Though we have had comments,
They never let the character grow up and mature.
Though we have had comments where people have said that there are, excuse the phrase, there are parallels between David and Tad in that Tad also can see ghosts. So that's just kind of an interesting, right? Gerald Stiles' ghost?
Gerard Stiles.
Stiles' ghost, yeah. So, what is this doing?
I don't know. Someone is fooling around with our internet tonight. But yeah, I think I think he got bored. I think he just, again, from what I can understand, his mom pushed him into it. And I'm not telling tales out of school here. I think that, I believe he said, my mom was a complicated woman. He loved her. There's no question in things that he said that he loved his mom, but basically she, like a lot of moms of the time, and even now, she kind of pushed him into it.
He was on Password or something, wasn't he? Jonathan and he both did a game show. Was it called Password? That you can see on YouTube?
Generation Gap.
Oh, really? I know that show. How
Generation
funny.
Gap. And I think his mother was with him when he first walks out, and then I think she disappears, or she's in the audience or something along those lines. But you can see her in that Generation Gap episode.
Yeah, they had
You kind of get the stage mother impression in that.
It was David and his mom and Jonathan, and then Jonathan also did What's My Line?
Oh, got it. Oh, I've seen the What's My Line clip. That's right.
If I'm not mistaken, David Hennessy does very well on Generation Gap. If I'm not mistaken,
I've got to go back and watch that.
He does pretty damn well.
Yeah, I've got to go back and watch that because
yeah, it used to be on YouTube. I don't know if it still is, but
probably a lot of that stuff is public domain now. He's good in the movie. I mean, although he doesn't have a huge part.
I hate to bring this up. They need to get this goddamn thing rebooted, because the more we talk about, like there are characters in the series that could be developed now, like David and Laura, into intensely frightening situations. The Quentin thing between David and Quentin could be very chilling if they could. I mean, it was chilling then, but now these are things that people can relate to. Having an alcoholic mother, and I don't know, and I'm sure they've got for people out there who would watch it. So
It's
I
it's
hope he
so
doesn't give up.
it's so interesting you say this because Peter and I go for a walk every night in Salem. We walk a couple of miles.
We really live in Collinsport. I mean, especially when the fog rolls in.
Yeah,
I mean, we truly live, even Laura Parker, when she came here to research the book, she's like, doesn't it remind you of what Collinsport would be like? I mean, even if you go to Essex, Connecticut, that is Collinsport. But Salem, you've got the docks. You know, you're waiting to see the doxies.
and
Ruby Tate and Crystal Cabot and, Maud Browning and all those people. It really, truly is like living in Collinsport. It is.
and every single night, without fail, we always stop for a few minutes at the House of Seven
At the
Gables.
House of Seven Gables.
But the reason I bring this up is
It's in our backyard.
yeah, literally. Peter and I were walking the other night, a couple of nights ago, and Peter said to me, well, we've talked about this many times before, where the show, everyone always says, oh, it doesn't become supernatural until Jonathan joins. But he said, if the show got rebooted,
Oh, you're going to give away my idea?
oh, I'm sorry, I won't say it. Never mind, we were walking.
I'll tell you what. I froze again as I was doing so well for a moment, and then all of a sudden I'm in slow motion again. What I said was, so you got Mark B. Perry, and his thing is a sequel. It's an indirect continuum of the show set in the present day. So that's what he's pushing. But because he's an Uber fan, his ideas are really cool. So I'm excited for that. We all, meaning Michael and John and myself and Penny, we were talking about what if it was to be redone again. And I'm all for it. I said it's got to be set in 1966. Even Marie Wallace agreed with me. Set it in the 60s.
Yeah.
But Barnabas would not be in the first season. If I was to do it, or they asked me and they haven't, but I'm going to give my opinion anyway. Vicky arrives. Burke Devlin is there, who was going to be part of the 2004 WB's show if it had been picked up. They were going to bring Burke back for that one. And what really gave Vicky a hard time, in a sense, was Laura, because Vicky becomes conflicted because she knows what it's like to not have a mother. And so early on, she's pushing David towards Laura, even though he's afraid of her. I would make that whole first season about Laura and the Phoenix storyline because it plays so well. Plus the other stuff, Josette, obviously you need Josette, you need maybe even Matthew Morgan. And then as the story progresses, you would start to get little tidbits about Barnabas thrown into it. You resolve Laura, she goes up in flames, and like a couple of days later, there's the knock on the door. Is Elizabeth Collins Stoddard in? Cut away. There's the portrait. The guy turns around. Madam, tell her that it's Barnabas Collins. Mic drop. We're out. And now you've got to wait till season 2 to get into Barnabas. That would be how I would do it.
Oh, very nice.
And I first of all, I love that idea too. A few people have commented here that it's interesting. We're talking about, now I'm going to kind of bring it full circle. We're talking about David as the subject of this episode, and Peter's just talking about how you really could focus on the supernatural elements that are pre-Barnabas. But it's really interesting. It would have been just a dark soap opera in a mansion about a family. All of the supernatural elements, especially initially, surround David, right? His mother is a phoenix. He's the one who suspects that Barnabas is a vampire. The whole coffin thing. Him seeing Sarah. So just interesting that he's so critical to the supernatural piece of the show.
Well, Sarah's tipping him off. I mean, she tells him to stay away from the old house. She realizes that, that her brother is dangerous. So she's giving David the hints because she's trying to stop everything that's going on. Um, and then again, as you say, Josette appears to him. So yes, a lot of the supernatural, or Vicky. Vicky is also, Josette uses her as her medium anytime she wants to make an appearance or to warn people. So it's like both Vicky and David are somehow drawn and prone to these things. And I think it's because like David being a child, Vicky is very pure of heart. She's very innocent.
Uh, Pat Swartz says uh, another thing.
Well, and also the
Go
whole
ahead.
family is under a curse. Don't we find out at the end from Judah Zachary?
Right, right. There is the whole Judah Zachary. Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
Pat brings up two things not
Like
related.
they are going to be pinpointed by all this caca.
She brings up two
I'm sorry.
things. No, no, please. The two things she brings up are the fact that David's character really starts to open up uh, the set of Collinwood. He finds secret passages and hidden rooms, and she thinks that's really cool. She wants to know what we think about David's participation in the Leviathan storyline, and I don't know anything about that storyline.
Certainly gets the rough end of the stick. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, and I think there again it goes back to David just being drawn for whatever. I just wish it would have been cool if they could have developed it a little bit. In other words, he would have been cognizant that maybe it's me. But yeah, I think well they were all drawn into the Leviathan thing. I don't think other than Roger anybody was drawn into it. I think they all ended up being involved in it one way or the other in the end. Um, so yeah, I just I it would have been good if they'd allowed if they had time and they allowed the character to grow up. He might have there might be your sequel series right there. Julia and Barnabas could have gone off to try and continue to find a cure, and David could have been, the one who's a warlock. Or I mean, Carolyn even got into it. I think in the end, and studied under Professor Stokes. I think was those possible endings by Sam
Yes.
Hall. I think
Yes.
Carolyn went off to become an occultist or something. Anyway, I'm sorry to digress, but yeah, I'm David being as involved with the Leviathan. That sucked, but they all end up getting pulled into that that little ball game.
I mean, you mentioned the nightmares and the dreams and how important they are to the storyline, certainly. But even the fact that he had them, and they in many cases are premonitions, come to fruition, that kind of thing. But Peter said this on a different walk. You can't forget that David is the son of a phoenix. He is, minus your idea about the woman dying in Arizona, he has supernatural. Half of him is supernatural.
Right,
Right. I mean,
right.
she's from that. She's Laura Murdoch is from that bloodline. So I do believe that the woman who gave birth to him was, for all intents and purposes, human when she was with Roger, but because she's cursed herself, this is in her bloodline. So again, the woman that dies in Phoenix is human. It's just now she's being taken over by this ancestor. So yes, it is part of his lineage. It's definitely part of his lineage on his mother's
And
side.
to kind of jump back just a hair about what was mentioned about David Open as far as the passageways and all of that. I don't know about you, but in those early episodes, Collinwood would seem so much more like it's always been the houses and all of that kind of thing, and that continues onward. But in those early episodes, like when Maggie escapes, the old house had endless underground tunnels and
Yeah.
rooms you could bolt from, and then you had a wing, abandoned wings, and all. David brought took us through all of that. So those were the things as a little boy that really excited me
Yeah.
about because you could just picture an old house sitting up atop a hill off of the sea with passageways going mad because of the war and all of that kind of. I mean, it was just that was what was so great about it was, and you were that little kid. You were the
Totally.
9-year-old. You were with David. You were seeing it through his, his eyes. But yeah, I would love to have seen that supernatural aspect of, or even him explore Laura a little bit more as he grew up. Well, let me figure out what's going on with my mother. Like, what's happening with my parentage? I'm pretty sure I just saw my mom bust into flames. That was kind of quietly tucked away, But it would be great to see David develop that as rather than the playroom thing.
Well, I know that in the end, before they thought they were going to get canceled, they went to Diana Malay and she was going to come back. They were going to bring the character of Laura back after 1841 Parallel Time. That was in the works. They had an idea
Oh,
for that. I also think when we talk about House of Dark Shadows and how I feel Dan shot himself in the foot because the Phoenix storyline could have been its own movie. Now, David would have been too old, I think. Certainly for a custody battle, he would have been too old. You couldn't have done anything. They would have had to have found another actor.
right.
But I think I would have loved to have seen a whole movie with Quentin and Barnabas, fighting for David and utilizing the Phoenix story. I think it would have been a really great standalone movie.
And you know what's really odd about the Phoenix is, and I don't know why I always think this. It makes sometimes my mind is feeble. It makes no sense. However, never. I always think, and I love Diana Millet's marvelously wicked, and she's a great actress. And I love the fight between her and Barnabas and the fight between her and Angelique are marvelous. I don't know why I always think I would love to have seen Marie Wallace get a stab at playing. Or if they were to do it again, cast an actress that looked like Marie Wallace a little bit. I don't know if it's the red hair and the flame thing or what, but I don't know. I don't know if what she would have done with that character would have been cool to see.
Yeah.
But I love Dinah Malay as well. I'm not saying that, but I don't know why my
No,
mind
no,
always
Marie would have
goes
been
there.
great. I agree with you. I agree with you. I wish Marie had done more on the show.
That,
Totally wish
that
she had done more on the show because every single one
oh,
of her
totally.
characters was different. They all had a very unique um, quality and aspect to them. Again, we talked about the fact that they didn't want her. Was it Gordon Russell? Gordon Russell did not want her to play Megan Todd. He said, no, she's Eve, she's imperious, or she's crazy Jenny, and she's wackadoo, and this is the nice lady that owns the antique store. That's not Marie. She's all wrong for the part. So he didn't want her for the part of Megan Todd. And I love that character, and then all of a sudden she does start to fall under the thrall of the Leviathans, and Barnabas bites her, which those scenes are great when she's coming on to Jonathan.
Yeah.
She's pulling the scarf off her neck and saying, I just want to be with you. She's got very Marilyn
Yeah.
Monroe.
Right.
I don't care about
Beautiful.
Jeb. I just want to be with you.
Love it.
Yeah.
I yeah, David, I think is one of the most interesting. I just told my son this last night. I said, we're talking about David, and I said, as I'm watching these episodes, he is fast becoming one of my favorite characters on the series because of the genuine, like when he's little and when Barnabas first comes into picture, and when he walks into the old house and David's jumping down the stairs and they have that conversation about Josette's ghost, and there are some really sweet sort of scenes between Barnabas and David when he's first out, where you think they're actually kind of connecting on a
Yeah.
level as family. Like he's like when he catches David, it's terrifying when he catches David in the house and the dogs are howling. But when he spots that David's been crying, and he says, "You've been crying," and then when he takes him home, he says to Willie, "You worry too much, much too much." In a sense, you get the feeling that Barnabas is trying to say, this is my kin, this is my family. I'm not going to harm this boy just to feed. I really do. I'm going to see him home. Knock it off. I'm not that monstrous. And to his credit, I mean, he was living off of cats and dogs at the time, so he was trying, you know. So, but yeah, and the innocence that David plays that part, jumping up and down the steps, and he's excited to see a new family member.
Yes.
You know, somebody, you know, when you're a kid, especially divorced kids of divorced families, when like my father would have a friend over that I'd never seen before, somebody my father grew up with who would stop by. That was exciting. You somebody new to
Yeah.
talk to about, somebody new in the family, somebody new. You could feel that with David. Ooh, I've got a cousin from England.
Right. Doesn't
He
he
just
say?
got in this house. He looks kind of mysterious. He wears a cape.
Right. So you're my
You know,
cousin? Yeah.
I love with Julia because
yeah,
Julia, she's trying, the poor lady, like she wants to cure Barnabas and she's trying to keep Maggie alive. She's lying through her teeth about, oh, there's a letter. I've written a letter, and if anything happens to me or Maggie, you're going to be exposed. You'll be killed. And then even with David, she's going out of her way. I mean, she does kind of throw David under the bus and say, well, he might be a little disturbed, and maybe you might want to send him away for a while. What I wish we could have shown this tonight when I remember seeing this as a kid on New Jersey Network when he gets into the basement and the lid of that coffin slams and he turns
coffin
around.
shuts.
Oh my God. That and he keeps like going from one end to the other, and finally Barnabas gets him, and Julia comes in at just the right time. She disarms Barnabas. David goes tearing up the stairs, and he's clinging on to Julia for dear life. Um, and even with, you see the maternal side of Julia saying, I promise he's not going to hurt you. He's and even then
Yeah,
Barnabas kind of like capitulates, and he's like, he saw my
yeah,
coffin and I don't know what to do. How am I supposed to handle this? And then he does plan to kill
right.
him. And Julia's like, do you understand if you kill David Collins, there's going to be an investigation in this town, the likes of which you've never seen? How do you think you're going to be able to keep under wraps if you
Yeah,
kill this little boy?
And you brought up the fact that there really is no follow up per se about him witnessing his mother burned to death. You know, putting that
yeah,
aside for a moment, but that coffin, I just watched this. The scene you're talking about where the coffin lid slams shut, that is the moment where David truly loses his innocence and realizes that there is dark forces. He's confused. Does he know that Barnabas is a vampire? There's that whole thing if you're an audience member, but really that is the precise moment where he is no longer a kid who has dark moments, but really recognizes that there's some supernatural force here happening.
And the follow up where they want to
yeah.
search the basement, and
100%. Yeah, that was good.
Barnabas plays that scene. He plays Burke and Dr. Woodard like a fiddle because he gets so, there's so much umbrage. How dare you, suggest that I have a coffin in my basement and I could throw you out, and they're about to walk out the door and he says, wait. And I love the fact that when they get down there, the camera is staying way above waist level. You can only see the candles, and I remember seeing that as a God, I would have been about 8 or 9 years old, and they pull back, and where the coffin was, there's just crates. There's only crates, and that's a really cool moment. That's a really, really cool moment.
Oh,
Meanwhile,
yeah.
Willie's got sciatica, so
Well, I think Willie was. Wait, did Willie get? I think Willie was shot. I think Willie was shot by that point.
it's just
No, I think Barnabas having the strength of 20. I think
Uh,
Barnabas having the strength of 20 men like Nosferatu. He just lifted the
oh,
damn thing up
that's a good point.
and put it into one of the secret
oh, yeah.
rooms.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I never understood why they never did that to begin. He's got tunnels and tunnels under his house, but he keeps it right under the basement door. Like, why don't you put it someplace else? Well, the scene with where he's got Maggie at the top of the steps, and he says, "Barnabas, what if she calls out? What if she screams?" He goes, "Oh, I want her to hear and to figure out for herself if I'm going to kill her and then have to kill her father too." He's letting you know right there. I don't mind killing as many people as I have to.
Yeah.
Those are some frightening, tense moments that don't occur as much as the show, got later on with other monsters in the show, but they were certainly terrifying with Barnabas. And I think because he had that mystique, Jonathan Frid had that Shakespearean kind of theater presence that think shit like that off. Like you said, he played them like a harp. That well, like you said to Woodard, I have opened myself up time and time again and been rewarded with one slap
Slap in the face after the other.
You forget that he's like, oh, wait, he is lying. He is doing all these terrible things. It's funny.
I love that scene because Jonathan is spot on, and Peter Turgeon, God love him, is going higher than a kite. He doesn't know his lines. He calls him
Yeah.
Barnaby. He calls him Barnabius. He calls him Barnabius. And then when Jonathan finishes that great speech, he's standing there looking, at all you see is the back of Turgeon's head, and you can see Frid going, "You son of a bitch. I just spewed off a page of dialogue and you really don't know what comes next?" There's this huge pause before he stands up and says, "I saw your sister Sarah tonight."
Right. That pregnant pause was not written in the script.
Because you see it. You see it in Frid's face. You see Frid thinking like, "You motherfucker," pardon my French, but
Right.
say your line.
Ah, for Christ's sake. Oh, oh God.
Great moment. That's a great moment.
Hopefully everybody was staring at that beautiful that dressing gown, that beautiful dressing gown that you only saw in those early episodes. That was really cool.
With the pleats in the sides. Yeah.
Well, that's like when the Undertaker showed up and said, "I have a letter for Mr. Jonathan," and Clarice Blackburn was like, "Follow me." Barnabas, he says it's for you.
She was always bailing. Clarice was always bailing somebody out of a jam. She does it early on with Mitch Ryan and feeds him the line. Because you can see like he's going, "What the hell?" And she's like,
"Oh shit.
You knew you wouldn't run away from stuff. Right or wrong, I would never run away from anything that I and she's totally fed him the line because he's gone way up. He's gone way up.
You get that pro feeling from her like a lot.
Frid,
she was a great lady. Great lady.
Frid said she held my hand. She totally held my hand that first week and got me through all of it.
Wow.
Yeah. We'll talk about more detail at some point.
Her expression, she opens the door on him.
Yes.
Brilliant.
And I love her interaction with David when she first comes to work at Collinwood. She's kind of she wants info. But she's trying, like, she sees the crystal ball that Burke gave him. And she goes, "Oh, when I was a little girl, there was a house that we said was haunted, and we used to go in all the rooms. And, she's like, I bet there's a lot of rooms around here, aren't there?" And, she's trying to pry him. What does he say? He goes to her, "You don't believe in ghosts, do you?" And she's like, "No, of course not." And he picks up his glass of milk and he goes, "You will."
She's the only one that calls him Davy, right? Other than maybe Willie once or twice. She calls him Davy. And I think everybody else is more formal with him. And I think that's a sweet kind of interaction between the two of them. And the play between them when Quentin first showed up between how nasty, how vicious the kids were with her was great. You know,
She has a
when she says, "I
nervous
know what you
breakdown.
kids are doing."
She she
Growing
totally
up, I hear you kids in there. I know what you're doing.
she totally she totally breaks down with Barnabas. I swear to God, those kids are going to give me a nervous breakdown. Oh,
Because they do,
oh,
they torture her.
they
Like it's
do.
like they go out of their way to be nasty to her for some reason, you know.
Yeah,
What are you doing? I know what you kids are doing. Mm-mm-mm. That
and
was great.
and and those great scenes between
uh,
David and with David and Matthew Morgan, where he's hiding him, and then finding out that he's
yeah,
got Vicky, and the poor kid is. And at one point, you think Matthew is gonna kill the kid because Matthew has flipped his lid.
yeah.
It's there's some
And
really
also the scenes between David and David,
oh sure
David Selby and David Hennessy. That there were a lot of wonderful. Uh, you get to when you get to know Quentin and how much he loved Jameson,
yeah
and the excitement that Jameson has when he sees Quentin and he brings him the pirate ship and or the brigantine ship or whatever, and
that's right
those whole early conversations, and they're really nicely put together. And again, I think if he should have been something for some. I think David Hennessy for some of it's a kid. He deserved some kind of accolade because he was brilliant
because also
playing
I,
Pitofi and every. I mean, just great actor.
is it when he finally realizes what's happening in the present day? Is it Barnabas? You know, he finally why Barnabas is there, and he's genuinely
Hmm.
hurt. Like I would never hurt a child. I would never, and I certainly wouldn't hurt Jameson. So the fact that you're telling me that somewhere
Oh, right.
in right in 1969 that I'm trying to kill this child, you know, it affects Quentin. It totally gets to him. And of course, it's a red herring. We all
Yeah.
think the skeleton in Quentin's room is Quentin when it's really Reverend Trask, Gregory Trask.
Right.
You know,
They were happy about it. So,
yes. Oh, totally.
mhm.
And
Yeah, those
Joan,
are the great moments.
Joan, the way she
She
plays
walls him
that,
up.
she walls him up deliciously. You know, she's got that
The Collins
grin.
family, the Collins family favorite.
Oh yeah.
That was cool to see her. It was nice to see her get a little sinister. You know, we don't see that a lot with, with Elizabeth. She was more, very demure, or not demure, but not sinister. It was nice to see Joan Bennett play that. It was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Well, the scene with the will. I
There's
mean,
that Collins
that's
family streak.
yes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, but again, we talked about this with Joan that
all of that
what she
stuff.
had with.
Like you said, the moment.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, you first.
No, no, I was just the writers. The writers were when they about the scene which you mentioned about Quentin realizing that he was tormenting or was going to hurt a child, and that those moments of change in those characters, those character arcs that they wrote in, were brilliant
Yeah,
and very touching.
yeah.
So go ahead, please.
No, so I think also too with Sam Hall and Gordon coming into the show, and they said we kept trying to give her more to do because we knew she could do more. Which I think is great about Judith is a spinster, but she's totally devoid of any. She doesn't have any of Elizabeth's traits. She has none of Elizabeth's traits, and then
No,
that wonderful deliciousness of her, putting it over on Trask. That's great. Then we have Flora, who again, Miss Billy Burke. Love her, totally love
right.
her. In parallel time, she's just kind of I don't say waspy. That's not the right. But she's a poor relation. She doesn't have the command because it's
Yeah,
Quentin's house. But I love her work with David Hennessy, especially that
yeah,
clip we showed. there was a lovely bond there. There was a really lovely bond there, and you could tell she was not going to let
Mhm.
anybody hurt this kid.
Well, it's interesting because people are commenting. So Connie just said the same thing. You see her her evolution over time with David. Like even at the seances, she stands next to him, and kind of as his protector. So
Totally, totally.
Mhm.
And it's just sad
A
because of
thousand percent.
where the show went. Tad goes off, and then David Hennessy is gone. And I don't know, if the show had come back to the present day, my gut tells me another actor would have played the part because he clearly was over it. He just didn't want to be acting anymore. So I'm assuming we would have, who that someone would have been, I don't know. And the show went one of two ways. They either were really good at recasting, and in some cases they were way off the mark, or they would go in a totally different direction. And it didn't always work.
John Carlin being the best example of recasting.
Well, early on, you have the original Sam Evans, Mark Allen, much better actor with David Ford, much stronger actor, multi-layered, multifaceted, much better. James Hall, I know he's on some of the boards and he's a nice man, but Johnny Carlin was a much better choice. Clicked really well in the role. Anthony George grows on you after a while, but he's not Mitch Ryan. He's just not Mitch Ryan.
Right.
Peter Turgeon, I couldn't wait for Barnabas to kill him.
Barnabias.
Barnabias. And by the way, you son of a bitch, say my name
Yeah,
right the next time.
He was painful.
Yeah.
And then
Barnabas, for Christ's sake. Yeah.
Whereas if it had been Robert Geringer, I think we all would have been. But you see, somebody had to be sacrificed. And I think originally it was going to be Julia. I want to say that had the ratings not gone where they were supposed to, or if Curtis had stuck to I'm killing him off no matter what you say, Dr. Woodard would have been the one to drive the stake into Barnabas's heart.
oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you said Julia was bound for a vat of acid, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what? You just made a huge point. Had it been, his name escapes me now, the original Dr. Woodard, the real Dr. Woodard,
The real one.
had
Geringer.
he been the one that Julia and Barnabas killed, the feelings would have been completely different than the one that did get killed. And I think that would have been a detriment to Barnabas. You might have seen him go. Audiences might have been pissed off, and that might have been a departure. So I guess it's good the way the way it went, but it was painful to watch.
Painful to watch. And also, you kind of wonder where the writers were thinking, like, at some point, Sarah is going to say, okay, enough is enough. And she gets pissed off with Julia. You shouldn't have done it. I like Dr. Woodard.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But then she comes in and she saves Julia. And
In a great scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Telling him, look.
I'm telling you, I'm not coming back ever again until you remember it, or something along those lines, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love her accent.
Mm-mm-mm.
Oh, little Sarah with her Philadelphian
Oh, yeah.
accent.
This is Barnabas.
That's right.
Something else about David Hennessy was at my first festival, he did his one-man show, then Louis did his one-man show, then they did a Q&A before the autographs. And they started talking about the show when he promoted it down in Spain, Mexico. That's the show was going to go into Spanish. So we went to Mexico. And he said, I always loved the way they said my name. He said, what infuriated me was David Hennessy. He would always go, Barnabas. Kevin Barnabas. And he said, it drove me nuts. Whereas in Spain, it was Barnabas. They had much more respect for my name in Spain.
Oh, yeah. So Jonathan Fritz said that.
Jonathan Fritz said that. Yep.
So my wife was. I said. I looked at her one day and I said, "Wait a minute. Did they ever show Dark Shadows? Didn't she said it was called Chas Tenebrosas?" It
That's
reminds
right.
me of that show. And Angelique was Angelica. So Angelique was Angelica compared to. I
Angelica.
prefer Angelique. You know,
Yes. Because
but
some of them
that's
are
pretty what
online.
Barnabas.
Some of them are online. You can watch them. And in fact,
You
Eddie,
know,
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Eddie Lucas, who usually tunes in, but he just
no.
started back up at work. He's been in Guatemala, and he's been posting on some of the groups some of the Spanish versions, which some of them have different music.
Oh, really?
Some of them, the music is
Oh, really?
replaced. Yeah, including, which it's crazy to me, Josette's Music Box. So now we have three different versions of Josette's Music Box. You've
Yeah. What did they replace it with? That's what I was gonna say. What the hell was the replacement?
some like very obscure, and like now I want to find it because I love that music so much. I'm like, oh, I gotta have that version too. I
Right.
want that version too. But then, like in a hair's breadth, it's whatever they chose. Then Vicky closes it. She goes to reopen it, and it's the music box.
Oh.
Like someone fell asleep at the switch and decided, oh,
Oh,
we'll leave that one in. We'll leave that one
the
in.
dubbing.
Yeah.
So they had to
Oh
replace the
God.
music because it was a single soundtrack. So they couldn't plug and play.
Some of it is Robert Cobert's music,
Got
but
it.
sometimes it's not.
Interesting.
It just depends. And I think sometimes it's
That would drive me
dubbed.
nuts.
Yeah, sometimes it's dubbed, and then sometimes I think there are subtitles. So it just depends.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
What other languages was the show translated into?
Oh gosh.
Curious.
Macaroon.
I know Spain. I know Spain. Is Spanish.
William? Uh-oh.
um. Oh, did we lose Michael?
Oh no.
Do we have any questions that we haven't answered, or any comments that Because we love getting your questions and comments. We got him back.
Let
Hello.
me in, let me in.
Get me the police quickly, quickly,
Open the door, open the
quickly.
door. When she's Magda pounding on the door, I love that one. Open the door, please.
Last night I watched her chop up Count Patoffy's hand and throw it in the fire.
Oh yeah, with a little axe, little heavy
Yes.
axe.
All of a sudden, I first of all, I love this. I love how the basement door to the old house, like initially, is they've got to go down a hallway that's filled with candles, or
Right,
in 1897, all of a sudden it's adjacent to the front door of the house.
right,
It's
right.
yeah, it's right there.
It's
I
like
got
that
a couple
hidden
of
room behind the
questions.
bookcase in the old house that just randomly appeared after a season or two.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about this. Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah, that was something else too about I was thinking about that, the bookcase. Why they never. Oh, what was I watching? I think it was that David is suspicious of Barnabas, and I thought, why didn't David think to look behind the bookcase? Why didn't he tell
Yeah.
David and Bert like that? Totally. But again, as we've said, I love your terminology, Collinsport or Collinwood amnesia.
Yeah. Right. Brilliant. Right.
And we'll talk about the tunnels.
Mm-mm-mm.
We'll talk about the tunnels at another time. But part of me is like, I think Barnabas did know about those tunnels. I think Joshua knew about those tunnels.
Oh, I see.
I don't think Barnabas was aware of those tunnels at all. I think
Well, I guess he
Joshua,
couldn't have been to put Maggie in there and forget that she might accidentally bump into a panel that would secure her release.
I just
You
wish
know?
we had seen them again. I wish in the color episodes that somehow they would
Right?
have used, because I love that. I was on the edge of my seat.
Oh, I just wanted to bring this up before I forget, my stroke brain. In the Salem branch, Ms. Parker's one of her brilliantly written books.
Yes.
Um, there is a lot about the relationship between Barnabas and David. In fact, they make a trip to Salem together.
Yes, they do.
And I think, and I'm going to have to revisit, uh, there's a conversation David's having with himself where he's like, could he actually have, could it be that was a vampire, is a vampire, like repressing it for all these years? But I think in the end, David's kind of like, well, if he is, he is, and if he's not, he's not. And he's Barnabas now, so he has that kind of those moments with him in the hotel or something. I seem to remember that being sort of a thing that he was trying to come to grips with. Yeah, sort of this. Is this the guy that
It's funny. It's funny that you bring that
he
up.
is, this age-old vampire, or is it just, you know?
It's funny that you
Yeah.
bring it up because, like, we live, what, I think 6.5 blocks away from the Salem Witch Museum, and when the story is set, is the year that the Witch Museum opened, because the story is set in 1972. And I think Lamar, if I'm not, does she make sight of that it's just opened. And of course, that's how Barnabas goes back to the witch trials, via the seance and all of that.
Mhm.
So it's funny that the Witch Museum plays such an important, because it just celebrated its 50th anniversary. What, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
2 years ago. So
And
then David plays an important part in Wolf Moon Rising. Having them go back in the Duesenberg.
Oh,
I love that she used that as
she
her
did
device.
beautifully with David in that.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah, you could listen to her books, and I don't. She's just a brilliant writer, but and to listen to her read them, I mean, David's a massive part of both of her stories. He's a huge part of both of those stories. Like you said, he's the one that's the time traveler, and he fights. He's being chased by Quentin, and I think you're right. I think that they were in Salem for the scuttlebutt about the museum opening or something, because I remember there was a celebration of some type, and they were walking through the town, and they were seeing the witches dressed up in front of or the dummies of the witches out in front of the museum.
Right.
And it's another brilliant. I mean, she takes you there. She really takes you there.
Yeah.
and she actually, David has like psychic abilities in the book.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so.
I
Right.
think she's kind of
Right.
onto the same thing we were talking about. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, if you haven't read, for those of
Yeah.
you watching, if you've got to read Laura's books, and start with Angelique's Descent and work your way through, and listen to her read them, because it makes them more fun. The fourth book, I don't know what the holdup is. It was supposed to be released shortly after she passed away, and we keep hearing it's going to come out. So I wonder if they're holding out until October.
The anniversary of her
It's killing
passing.
me.
And
Yeah,
and her
It's
birthday.
killing me.
I want to hear it too, Michael. Trust me, I want to hear it too.
Yeah.
So
I
definitely
can
check
imagine
out.
you guys are on a whole different level.
Yeah, we miss her. We
Yeah,
miss
so
her.
you got, if you're a fan and you haven't, shame on you. It's good stuff.
And it's
Spend
great.
some money.
Spend some money, and it's a great, like, it's a continuum, because she sets it in 71, 72. It picks up where the
Oh
show
yeah.
left off. It picks up where the show left off, and David is prominently featured, so you want to check those out. Concluding thoughts about David Collins. Demon Child or Misunderstood?
Misunderstood.
I say Misunderstood.
100%.
I say both end. I say no doubt the spawn of a supernatural being.
Yeah.
But like the rest of the family, that don't make him bad, baby. We live in a world of gray, not black and white. And he's no less a victim to his circumstance than Barnabas, Quentin, Elizabeth, even Julia. They all have skeletons. I think of any of them, David is the most innocent, other than perhaps Ben Stokes of his surroundings. Just
True.
a kid acting as a kid would. So I say both end, and we love it.
We love him. We love wherever you are, David Hennessy. I know you wear hundreds of hats, but we love you. The fans love you. We'll always love David Collins and all the various David Collins. I mean, I'm assuming we're going to get in this sequel series. We're going to see a much older David Collins because I believe it's his kids that are running the house now. I think that's the tack they're taking on it, is that it's his children that are. But one would assume that David will figure into the plot, as the older patriarch running the house. So who knows? Fingers
God, wouldn't it be
crossed.
cool if they could get David Hennessy
It would. It
just every
would.
now and again to pop in and be David? Just every now and again, not often, but just every now and again.
Well, they keep saying that. Without a question, I think Catherine, I think David, and I think Jim. I have a feeling we'll see those three people um, materialize in this sequel series in some. And I've said, just let her be Maggie. Just let her be Maggie.
She won't
Right,
be in, or some version of that.
Well, that
right.
was my thing. Yeah, I know Michael had suggested being a matriarch. I had suggested that she's now running the Collinsport Inn. So that was my idea, was that she would be running the Collinsport Inn.
Well, in Miss Parker's books, Roger gave Maggie the Collinsport Inn. It was owned by the Collins family, and in Miss Parker's books, Roger gave it to Maggie. Either in the
Correct.
books or in the audio dramas, one or the other. He gifted it to Maggie. I can't remember the audio dramas or whatever, but go with it, baby.
I think so. I think so. Well, it's been a hoot and a half. Also, too, like for those of you who might have been inquiring, you can find Shadows on the Wall only on Amazon or eBay, and now it goes. This was the original show Bible by Art Wallace.
Carrie asks, where can you find that book?
Carrie, go on to eBay, but the last time I saw a copy of it, I think it was buy it now, $85.
Oh, wow.
So it's not cheap. Catherine, if anybody is in contact with Catherine, maybe because I think I'm pretty sure a Pomegranate Press, yeah, Pomegranate Press, I am pretty sure is the one who produced this. Maybe they could do 100 copies, limited print edition, and just reissue it for a short period of time. So write to Catherine. She's really cool about stuff like that. And it's a pretty slim book. It's only 91 pages. So it'd be great if we could get a hardcover copy. If you've ever seen the scripts for the show, they were in these beautiful leather bound with I think it had gold etching on the sides. And I believe that's what they would put their scripts in. I've never come across one, but I would love to. So even if they could do a limited edition like that, in a leather bound or faux leather bound with that lovely gold etching on the side, write to Catherine, see what she says. Maybe we can get her to do something like that. Shadows on the Wall by Art Wallace. Thank you, Mr. Panzerato.
Thank you. I love the fact that now the camera's working perfectly.
Now everybody is in tune perfectly. Isn't that always the way? Thank you, Dr. Schaefer. And we will be back soon, so stay tuned for the theme of next week's Dark Shad-Bros. And remember, like and subscribe on YouTube. It means a lot.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Thanks, Geraldine. It was fun, too. Stay in the shadows, everyone. Have a great week.
Adieu.
God bless you.